Well, good morning, everybody. There was one more announcement to make, but I get why John didn't announce it, because it was about himself. We have said for the last couple of Sundays that one of the privileges that we have as a community is to have John and Nix as pastors amongst us, with Nix's primary focus over our worship, and John in his pastoral leadership and teaching. And we are excited about the season that's ahead for us. We feel like there's not just like this annual vision and we have a word from the Lord, but actually there's a seasonal shift for us in terms of where we're going, and we want our pastors to be strong. And so next Sunday will be John and Nix's last Sunday for a little bit, and as of 1st of November, we collectively as Anthem are giving them the privilege of 3 months to just go and reset, to have a sabbatical, to go and charge their batteries. It has been a very interesting time to be a pastor over the last 5 years within this particular community. When we go back to the miracle that was Kiara, but the trauma that had to be processed through COVID, through riots, through floods, through the Domino Foundation, etc. And John carried a lot of that on his shoulders together with Nix. And so it is our privilege to bless them in the coming months. And so you have approximately 4 days to get hold of him. After then, it's going to close. He then has a week to deal with whatever he needs to deal with. And as of the 1st of November, we are going to ignore them for 3 months. Is that all right? We're going to ignore them. That's the way we can bless them. It's the only time you can ignore them. Is that all right? But as of 1 November, and then they'll kick in on the 1st of Feb again, back with us as a community. We look like what we look at. We're in this series of Make Every Effort, and I kicked this off 2 weeks ago by just talking about where our focus is. That's where we kind of start to head in that direction. We start to look like where our focus is. And I used the example of owners and their pets, right? Now, I had a couple of you come to me and say, you don't believe me. So I had to go and do a little bit of homework. Owners look like their pets, and now I know what you black folk and what you Indian folk are thinking. You're thinking, you white guys, honestly, you and your pets. I can't argue with you at this point in time. But just for you black guys there, I did leave one picture in the right-hand side or the left-hand side as you're looking at the screen, just to say it happens to all of us. What we look at, we look like. Okay, we can move on from that. Thanks, Nix. That's not the point of my message today, but just of what I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. But I was referencing this thing of making every effort and our desire to make every effort in the right direction. Because what a sad reality for us if we are putting everything into something only to realize that it counts for nothing. I used the example of me when I wrote an English exam and I wrote 7 pages to answer one question. I was so proud of myself, thinking that I had just given the model answer for the teachers to mark all the other papers off of, only for my mates to start sniggering at me afterwards because I had misread the question. And so I had made every effort answering the wrong question and got naught. Our desire in our Christian faith is that we would not make every effort, write our 7-page thesis, our masterpiece to give to the world, only for it to be answering the wrong question and for it to count for naught. And so we've had 2 weeks already. Jack's preached last week, and there are 7 statements in the scriptures that say, make every effort. Now, when we get this a little bit out of sync, what we can think is that we make every effort to salvation. We make every effort for our salvation. That is not what we are saying here. It is not what the scriptures teach. Our salvation is by the grace gift of God given through the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Dallas Willard says this in these words. He says something. Grace is not opposed to effort, but to earning. We cannot earn our salvation. But the grace of God empowers us. Another way of saying it, grace is not opposed to effort, but empowers it. So we are empowered to make every effort to live this life that by the Spirit of God, who has been given to us as a deposit guaranteeing our eternal inheritance, we're able to live. Jesus came that we may have life and have it to the full. And I'm sure all of us would stick up our hands and say there are some areas of our lives that we do not feel yet have come into the fullness. And therefore, there is every effort we can make to keep taking hold of the work of the Spirit of God in us from a position of being rescued and saved. From a position of Christ himself having overcome darkness as we were singing together, as we were reminding ourselves, having overcome sin. And it's from that position of security and strength that we can take hold of the Spirit of God and walk into the fullness of life. Today, we're going to be looking at one of these make every effort statements, and it's found in Ephesians chapter 4, in verse 3, but we're going to read from verses 1 to 6. And so read with me. As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort, there it is, to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. So there are a couple of things. It's quite rich, emotive language that Paul uses to the Ephesian church here. And in these first 6 verses, we see quite a massive, substantial theology. It's live a life worthy of the calling you've received. To be raised as a child, or to be put into the position of a child of the King, a child of God himself. To be put into that position. There is a life worthy of that. It talks about being humble and gentle, being patient, a unity of the Spirit of the bond of peace, one hope, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God. He talks about one a lot, as though he is urging us to say that almost the essence of all of this is be patient with one another, make every effort to live a life worthy of the calling you received. The calling you received is to be children of the Father in heaven, one family. Therefore, will you make every effort to live as one, united in the Spirit of God by the bond of peace. This is where we are going to focus our attention today. And I can't stress more than what Paul stresses here as he writes this thing of oneness and unity. Jesus gave his life so that we would be reconciled into the family of God. So in essence, he's given his life, not that you may be free on your own, but that we may be free as part of the family, as one family. Let us not be found guilty of separating the family. Let us not be that family member that splits us. And so Paul says a few things here, and then I'm going to extrapolate it for us and hopefully be helpful. He talks about being completely humble and gentle. So make every effort, but just preceding it, he says, be completely humble and gentle, patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity. So it's as though his thought process is outworking itself here. He's saying, no, we must be humble and gentle, we must be patient. Actually, the essence of this is that we are in unity together. And it's interesting that he uses the words gentle and humble. Of all the words that he could have used, he uses gentle and humble, and I believe he did so for a reason, because in the 99 chapters of the Gospels, 99 chapters, 4 Gospels, there is only one place that Jesus reveals his heart, reveals his character, and it's in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. It says this, "Come to me, all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart." I am gentle and humble and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And so what we're seeing by what Jesus is saying by Matthew's record is, if you come to Jesus, you're going to find humility and gentleness, which means we will find rest. How many of us are feeling rested as we sit here this morning? See, life is pulling in a direction. The work of the enemy is so to distract us from the beauty of Jesus that we distract ourselves, we prevent ourselves from taking the time to come to gentleness, the one who is gentle and humble and has rest. And so Jesus' way is another way. If we are sitting here and feeling pulled in so many directions, feeling distracted, feeling like we are not able to enjoy rest, may I suggest we reorientate ourselves and come to Jesus, to his gentleness and to his humility. See, most of us feel exhausted keeping up with all that is going on. And some may even say this about our interactions with one another: when I'm with so-and-so, I feel exhausted. There is no rest for my soul when I engage with so-and-so. Do you think people say that about you? Because when we come to Christ, when we look at Christ, we become like him, like the dogs look like their owners, or their owners look like their dogs, whichever way around it goes, or they choose their dogs according to what they look like, I don't know. But as we look at Christ, we start to become like him, which means that increasingly people should enjoy your presence, and they should leave our presence feeling rested. They should leave our presence feeling like, I can breathe. I feel encouraged. I feel like I've got someone in my corner. I feel like I've got someone who can listen and understand. I feel so lifted up. And we're going to go into some things that can practically help us become those people. So I don't think Paul uses humble and gentle by accident when he's speaking to the Ephesian church. I think he mirrors what Jesus said about himself, because Paul had found the key to saying, actually, the only way we can remain one is if there is a humility and gentleness. He then says the second thing, be patient, bearing with one another in love. I love this definition of patience. It's going to come up now. Internal and external control in a difficult circumstance, which control could exhibit by delaying an action. I'm not so good at this. I see something, I respond. But I'm learning, because there is someone in this community that is very good at this. And he's one of our elders, one of the guys that exercises governance over us, Gert Muller. I am constantly amazed that he has this incredible ability to take challenges, to take pain, to take contest, to take offense, not ability to take offense, to take things that could cause offense, to take all of that, and under incredible patience, be able to exercise internal and external control in a difficult circumstance and exhibit delaying an action, which results in holiness, righteousness, love, keeping the bond, keeping the spirit of unity. The beauty of community is that we have men and women amongst us that can teach us and show us. And we're able to hold their hands and say, teach me. And as I spend more time with Gert, I'm able to hopefully have some of Gert rub off on me, because as I look at him in this area, I become like him in this area. Then we get to the sentence, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. Through the bond of peace. And so what he's saying is unity is what we are wanting to accomplish. Unity in the Spirit. But it's done through the bond of peace. And so peace is what we are aiming at. Peace is what we need to take hold of, because if we can find peace, unity will be the outcome. But the reality is, so many of us today are struggling. We are not internally at peace, which means that we can never externally be at peace. And so we're not externally at peace in relationships because we're not internally at peace with our own selves, let alone with others. Paul goes on a little bit later in this chapter. So if we carry on reading chapter 4, and he helps us with some ways. And he says this in verses 22 of chapter 4. You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds. So behavior comes after our mind has been reset. And to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. And so what he's saying is we want to put off our old selves, we want to take hold of our new selves, but actually the way we do that is by grasping that in our minds. And so it's almost as what he's saying is going back to Proverbs chapter 28, verse 19, which is, without vision, people perish. Without vision, we go backwards. Without vision, we cannot become something new. And so if there is nothing to take hold of, if we don't have Jesus as the model human, if we don't have Jesus as the example, if we don't have a vision of something that we want to be, all it becomes is this constant attempt to not be angry, as opposed to being peaceful. So we always want to just keep fighting things off. I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. Verses 30, he goes on, verse 30. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, all rage, all anger, brawling, slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. We started this series of Make Every Effort with that one story of the husband and the wife, and then the wife got caught up in the current, if you remember that from 2 weeks ago. If not, I encourage you to go and listen to the message. But in essence, the point was this. When we don't make every effort, when we are standing still, we are not static. The current of the society, the current of culture is pulling us away. Why? Because it's been given over to the kingdom of the king of the air, which in the scriptures is regarded as Satan, our enemy. His desire is to pull us away from Jesus. So when we are just standing, we are being pulled in this current away. Isolation, malice, anger, rage, separation from one another. Not having internal peace, which means we can't have external peace. And so if we are not swimming with all of our might against the current of culture, we are going backwards and moving away from Jesus. And so what Paul is saying here is he's saying, we want to get rid of all of that stuff. And how do we do it? Well, let's reorientate ourselves. Let's take hold of the vision of Jesus Christ so we can be kind. We can be compassionate. And as I look at these things of Jesus, so I can start to become like these things of Jesus. See, the kingdom of God is the environment with Christ as king, with God in it. And the kingdom of this world is the environment with God not in it. The environment of Satan, of our enemy, our adversary. And so what we want to be doing as often as possible is either swimming against the current of modern day culture or taking breathers and getting out of the culture to get into the river of life which flows in the opposite direction. That's what this Sunday does. We are able to take a moment out where we're able to come with like-minded people and we get out of the culture of this world which is pulling us away from Christ, and we're able to get into the river of life together and be able to be pulled towards Jesus. You will hear it said every Sunday from this platform in some shape or another. Community, the Christian community, is one of God's greatest gifts to us, being able to be free in this life. Don't despise it. Make every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. And so this bond of peace, how do I grow in peace? I'm going to go through 4 things. Again, not a complete list, but a list for today. 4 things that help us grow in peace. Because if we can grow in our internal peace, it will start to have an external bearing on our relationships. And as we have external peace with one another, so it looks like unity in the Spirit. All right, you with me? First, order. Is there order in your life? Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7 talks of Isaiah is prophesying about the coming Jesus. And he says, actually, when there's an increase of his government, when there's an increase of Christ's order in our lives, there is an increase of peace. And so as we orientate ourselves, as we look at Jesus, so we're able to take hold of him and take hold of the way he lived his life. So there is a governmental undertaking. There is an order to our lives. But it comes at a cost. Because it means standing against some of the things of what our friends are doing, what the world is doing. We're trying to lead our kids through this, and they have to confront it in their schools every day, and they come back and they think that we are totally nuts. But will we keep presenting Jesus? And as the increase of his government is upon us, so there is an increase in peace. What does that practically look like? Well, I think it looks like this. Are you prepared to make the tough calls to bring order to your life? Are you willing to make the tough calls? Jackson and I have repeatedly, because we don't make one decision once for all of our life. It's this constant reevaluation. And many of you will know we have full lives, Jackson and me. Number of children as they're growing up, etc., and school demands and responsibilities. So we have a full life, but it's not complicated. There's a difference between full and complicated. And I think too many people live complicated lives, not uncomplicated lives. And as a result, they don't have the order of Christ. And therefore, there is a lack of internal peace because there is a lack of order. See, what happens when your family is not in order, or when your life is not in order, or when things are not in order, is you start to bleed at the margins. And when you don't have margin, we start to respond to the pressures of life. And then the most common place to respond to the pressures of life are to those closest to you. And so our pressure, because we have a lack of discipline and a lack of order, comes out sideways to our spouse, to our kids, to our church community. And it's this community that suffers, and the unity of the Spirit is broken. Because we haven't made a decision to remain ordered under the government of Christ. See, what margin does is it acts as a shock absorber. See, when you have it, you can endure a bump in the road. When you don't have it, it hurts like hell. And I think too many of us are living without margin and therefore with no shock absorber, and life is full of bumps in the road. And it's coming out sideways relationally. Our internal lack of peace is coming out into an external environment and breaking relationships. Paul says, make every effort. Make every effort through the bond of peace. What will we do to get peace into our worlds? Will we treasure it? Will that become the vision that captures our heart so that we will order our lives around it? So just an application for us. Why don't you spend some time this coming week assessing where life is happening to you as opposed to you having life in your hands? Does that make sense? Make an assessment of where life is happening to you, where you have lost control of life. Make an assessment of it. Write it down. Articulate it. Present it to God. He is our first port of call. And then talk to someone. Get some counsel from the right people, and then make a decision to change it. Example, I've been feeling for myself over the last 3 months that I am increasingly getting pulled in too many directions with my decision making. And so I've had to identify. I didn't know at first what it was. I just felt that I was being pulled, and I'd lost a sense of peace and order. And then I could identify I'm being asked to make too many decisions. And I cannot process that many decisions well, so it felt like I was dropping balls. And so I wrote down, I identified it. I was then able to write down and go, where are all the areas where I am responsible for decision making? And as I wrote them, I was able to present them to God, and very clearly He was like, this one's had its season, it's time to go. And you'll be able to get margin back again. And so I will be working that out in the coming months as I let go of a major part of what I've been doing for the last number of years in decision making, so that I can be free to carry on with what God has called me to in this season. Make the assessment, friends. Do the work. Second, health. Healthy things grow and then bear fruit. Right? So the goal of health is not always to grow. We've heard it many times in churches or in Christian language, healthy things grow. Yes, they do, but the point of health is not growth. The point of health is fruitfulness. And so we want to be fruitful. It's no point us just growing in our knowledge of God and growing, but there's no fruitfulness attached to it. Even though Paul writes, make every effort to grow in your knowledge of God, it's for a point, so that you may grow in love, the fruit of love. And so, again, where is fruitfulness in your life? And again, we don't want to confuse growth and fruitfulness. And so would you love your family enough? Would you love this family enough to take care of your health? Because if we extrapolate it, our health has an effect on our margin. Our health has an effect on our internal peace, which comes out to our external peace, which results in unity. And so if we want unity, if we want to make every effort to retain the unity, to maintain the unity of the Spirit, then I need to look after my health. Every aspect of our health. You see, friends, we have been designed by God to be attracted to life, not to death. We're attracted to life. And when I asked the question earlier, how many of us have interactions with people where we feel like, I do not feel rested coming out of that relationship or out of that conversation? It's because we've encountered something that mimics death, not life. And so how many things are we doing where we're looking at death in our lives? We're looking at unhealthy eating. We're looking at deathly entertainment. We're looking at stuff on the web that is not honoring of your spouse. We're looking at things that contain death, and then we want to stand and worship God, but we wonder why we're isolated. We wonder why people don't want to be around us. Because you give off a scent, friends. You give off something that's not attractive. We're designed, we may not be able to put our finger on it, but we're designed for life. And so if you can't quite put your finger on why people are not hanging around you, possibly, I'm not saying it is, but possibly we've got to do an audit on our lives. Like, are we looking at deathly things or at life-giving things? Are we making the decisions that lead us to life? And so what's an application for us today? Well, do something this coming week which improves your health. Whether it's eating better, whether it's exercising, whether it's booking a counseling session, whether it's stopping watching deathly content, take a step. It's in your hands. You can do it. And as we look upon Jesus, gentleness and humility starts to become our story. Patience starts to become our story. Internal peace starts to become our story. And external unity in the Spirit is the outcome. You with me? Do something this week. It's in your hands. Make every effort. Third, character. Christ formed in us. Matthew chapter 11, Paul says, gentleness and humility. Jesus has come to me, I'm gentle and humble. Can I say, come to me? Friends, come to Richard, the pastor, because I'm gentle and humble. I'm trying and I'm growing, and I want to keep looking at the gentleness and humility of Christ so that I may look like the gentleness and humility of Christ. Come with me on that journey as we keep looking at Jesus. Galatians 4:19 says, "My dear children, for whom I'm again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." Paul has this so deep. He's not in the pains. It's like the pains of childbirth. And as men, we can never assume to know. We can only observe. But you ladies will know the effort that Paul is going to see that Christ is formed in the people that he's ministering to. And I hope you can see today by my urgency and my passion that I am in the pains of childbirth. Not quite like Cam's going to be in the next week or two. Because I believe in this. Jesus died that we may be called sons and daughters of our Father in heaven. And the Spirit of God was given so that we may be unified in Him. And so every step that we do not take towards that is a step that we are going in the current against that. Which means that we are causing the pain. I sometimes do this. Once I come out of meeting with somebody, I try and do an assessment of how I've responded in that moment. How have I treated that person? And honestly, there are times when I can see a wince on Jesus' face. Where he's like, "Rich, I did not die for that. I died for something more beautiful. Will you go and apologize? Will you change it for next time? Will you take the appropriate action?" And see, we can only do that when we have margin. All of these things are connected. So when we're too busy and we're running through life, we don't get to go and assess things. We don't get to assess, have I hurt somebody in the process of this conversation or relationship? And so in this character thing, it's like, will you do the hard work? So there's, Jack's actually used this example, so I'm going to use it on her behalf. But we were dealing with something, and she had this picture of, like, in our garden, a little molehill. And we're like, there's something in the garden which is spoiling our garden. And so most of us, all we want to do is we just want to spread that sand out on the lawn, put a bit of water on so the sand goes below the grass, and then everything's fine. But that thing still is under there. And then the next morning, there's 2 molehills. And then 10 molehills. And then we go after it. And we start digging. And by the time we get to the end of it, we have a tunnel system of just dug up the entire lawn. And then we have to phone Aubrey and say, "Can you come and fix it?" Friends, sometimes we've got to go to the deep excavation within our hearts, within our character. And it can look like we are not just doing a little bit of gardening and pruning, but we're actually ripping up the whole garden, because some of us need to rip up the whole garden to relay it. Are you prepared to do the hard work? Is it worth the effort for you? You see, if your effort is focused on just not being angry, it may not be worth it. But if your effort is focused towards this Jesus, captivated by the image and the person of Jesus, who has saved us and called us to life and godliness and made a way for us to live godly, to be able to enjoy the family and the community. If He has given it, then that starts to captivate our hearts. Jeepers, it is worth every effort to do that. If what is going on inside of me prevents me from enjoying that, I am all over that. Will you be as well? Which leads me to my last point, our pace. You want internal peace, regulate your pace. Regulate your pace. Walter Adams, who was the spiritual director to C.S. Lewis, says this: "To walk with Jesus is to walk with a slow, unhurried pace. Hurry is the death of prayer, and it only impedes and spoils our work." You know, your every effort that we're trying to make, hurry spoils and impedes our every effort. It never advances it. During our sabbatical that Jackson and I had, that you very kindly allowed us to have, allowed me to recognize some things within my own life, which the molehills became deep excavations. And I couldn't understand why sometimes people had encountered me and they had left feeling like they had been hurt by me when there was nothing of that in my heart. And I was hearing some things of how people were responding to me, and I was like, how have they misconstrued who I am? And then God revealed to me over time this thing of, you know when you try to touch a car that's speeding, you touch it, you'll hurt your hand. Your hand will get taken like that. And so it is with our lives. When we are running too fast, people try to have interaction with you, but it's like trying to touch a car moving too fast. We end up getting hurt. It wasn't the car's intention to hurt me, and it wasn't my intention to hurt myself by touching the car, but that's what happens. And so though our intentions can be noble and good, when we are moving too fast, we hurt people. And we wonder why there's no unity, and we wonder why there's no peace, because we're too fast. Can we slow down? Slow down does not mean not working hard. I do want to say that. For some of you, particularly younger people in the room, I think you need to speed up a little bit. But what happens when we carry weight, friends, is we go a bit slower. We go a bit slower. And so what happens is we wonder why people aren't recognizing the gifts of God in us. We wonder why we're not being real contributors to the building of the community. We wonder, well, we're not carrying the weight of the vision of Jesus, of unity. See, if we are carrying the weight, that weight sits on us. And it's not a burden, because he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, but it's the weight, and it's like, the responsibility. Because it's heavy but not heavy, you get what I'm saying? It's like you walk slower. If someone's on your back, you walk slower. And as we walk slower, we have time to appreciate one another. We have time to have conversations where we're not just going, next thing, next thing, next thing. Our shock absorbers are intact. We're not just hurting one another because we're going over a speed bump, or I give you a flippant answer when you're asking me something that's deeply profound for you, and I don't have time for you, and I give you a flippant answer, and then you give it the weight of a pastor, but I've just given it to you as a person in passing. And we weight these things differently, and we wonder why our lives, you get it. See, as my internal peace grows, so my external peace grows. And as my external peace grows, which is relational, unity becomes the expression of the relationships. Grace is not opposed to effort, but it is to earning. Grace is not opposed to effort, but empowers it. Can we make every effort, friends, to grow in our peace by taking some very practical steps? Very practical steps to govern our pace, to work out, to reorder our lives, to look after our health, and to do the hard work of our character excavation. And you will find internal peace coming and a whole lot richer relationships starting to be the result and being part of building this beautiful thing called the church. Would you pray with me? Spirit of God, we thank you that it is you that has been given, guaranteeing our inheritance as sons and daughters of our Father in heaven. And one of your primary responsibilities having been given to us is to protect our unity. And so we want to hear these words of Paul, and we want to make every effort to keep in step with what you have been given to us for, which is to keep our unity. And we do this through the bond of peace. And so we make a commitment this morning that, Spirit of God, would you have empowered us to be able to make every effort. It is your grace that has been given that enables us to make every effort. And so we make a commitment today as Anthem Church that we will commit to growing in peace by giving attention to these areas of order and health and character and pace. Help us to take the steps this week, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.